right, guys, welcome to our next video. We're going to go through YouTube comments today over the last week. So, first one. I'm wondering if per Grady, things won't be as they seem at the hospital, and the Walker brother being kept is a sign of bad things to come. Yeah, definitely could be. Alternately, and slightly less ominous, it's a callback to Maggie and Beth's brother being kept in the barn as a walker for an equivalent amount of time, too. And in this case, it could be said that Lewis wasn't ready to let go of that particular death until the baby's new life started, for sure. And yeah, I mean, Lewis, I don't know what to think about him. We talked about before how it wasn't terribly realistic that he like pretty much left Herschel to deliver the baby so he could go do something different. And, there was just kind of some strange things like that. He is teaching Herschel now, as we're seeing in episode 2. But I also feel like it's kind of ominous. Like he's the doctor, and I feel like he's going to get killed at some point, and he's not like the most hopeful guy in the world. So I don't know. Luis is kind of interesting, but I agree that it could be a very, ominous sign of things to come. That could definitely be the case. Reply could be because actually several of the reviews definitely hinted at someone betraying people at the end of the season that they felt wasn't super well set up. Okay. But yes, I also picked up on the parallel of them keeping walkers with the Greens, keeping the walkers. But in this case, it did serve a practical purpose of a fuel source, and it's totally possible that the brother was left specifically for the birth of the baby. Yeah, true. All right, I want to correct my earlier theorizing about the episode title spelling the flight. I actually, after this episode with the whole fight light thing, think it's meant to be read two ways, both the fight and the light. That's why episode 4 is Found Lost, the only multi-word title, so that it can be read both ways. Just picked this up on my second watch through as well. The Bethesda fountain that Maggie and Beth have a scene together is in the opening credits. Oh, I didn't realize that either. I will have to take a look at that. So thank you. Yeah, and good point about, fight and light. That makes sense, especially because they turned on the lights. So yeah, that's insightful. That's really good. Okay. Before I dive into this video, here's the main things I picked up on. Obviously, Renata is a Beth proxy, big time. They had her and Maggie sistered up immediately. So many similar personality traits, choosing the fight versus the light. Come on. They are going to choose the light this season, and that's what leads to Beth. Yeah, I like that. I agree with that. Just as I've always said, the characters need to come full circle before she will come back. Since the moment Beth died, they've always chosen the fight. DDS3 highlighted this in particular with Daryl just reiterating all they do is run and fight. Now Maggie is choosing the light. Therefore, thematically, Beth can only come back once that happens. Other things, there are lots of yellow light sources, yellow flashlights, yellow lanterns. Other colors I noticed was in general, there's a lot of green and blue tones in the shots. In particular, lots of green in the hospital. The jackalope also immediately stood out to me, but I haven't pieced that together yet in my brain. I've also been watching a bunch of Comic-Con reviews, and the two things so far, number one, JDM says that the AU episode ties into the current storyline in real time. So the events that occur there are not just separate off by themselves, they have real-world, real-time implications. And number two, Lauren mentioned that all of the characters this season drink moonshine. And that's, I guess I didn't actually say that when I was doing my analysis of episode 2, that I mentioned that when she drank the alcohol, she kind of winced, and that seemed like a callback to Beth in Still. But yeah, I mean, assuming, I guess, that whatever alcohol they had in the bar would have run out 10 years later, right? So clearly Dillard's got to have some sort of still or some way to make alcohol. So I guess it makes sense that it would be moonshine. I noticed a bunch of that stuff also. I was so happy to hear about the moonshine drinking. Haha. They said that the season is filled with Easter eggs, and we got so much to look out for. Yeah. Definitely seeing the Easter eggs already. Also, FYI, the audio cuts in and out through a lot of this video, unfortunately. Okay, I will take a look at that. The Walking Dead, let's go. Okay. All right, so good times. Let's see through all of those. All right, so, and of course, in 1016, Daryl is playing Burning Down the House. It's also a bit entertaining that even when walkers have their heads cut off, they still have talking or growling heads. Not merely symbolic of Beth, he would have consciously chosen that song in memory of Beth, or if someone else chose it, he would have immediately been reminded of Beth, and so clearly he did not want to turn it off and play something else because he wanted to avoid thinking of her. So this is from an earlier video. But yeah, I agree. All right, the jump the shark moment that they are referring to, I feel, is referring to the AU episode. I think so too, yeah. There are some fans that might see just the sheer existence of that episode as jumping the shark, though I hope it's more than that. And it's something so bonkers in the episode, i.e. finding out Beth is still alive. But really, it could just be the existence of the AU episode itself, yeah. I hope she is in the title sequence, but I don't see how that would confirm that she's a full paid employee of AMC. Oh, I hadn't seen the Spain review. That's very interesting. Emily's necklace looks to me like it has a ring on it. I'm hoping even in the AU we get some kind of Daryl reference. I do too. If Maggie and Negan are somehow fated, then it would be great if we got that for Beth and Daryl as well. They've already made a point to show in episode 1 that Maggie wears Glenn's wedding ring around her neck. And yeah, the Insta post from Emily was crazy. She ended up replying to one other person in the thread, Angela Kang. Angela Kang and me, an obvious TDer. She also maybe recognized my name as I have ordered cameos from her before and tagged her in my post about Beth's auction clothes. I'm pretty much willing to bet money at this point that she filmed something with Roman Levi and possibly Norman as well, since he was in LA at the same time too, back in February at Warner Brothers Studios. At the very least, we are getting her in one scene of the Daryl Dixon show. I hope you are right about that. Okay, so let me address a couple of these. I agree. I mean, and the way that they were talking about the episode, I do think, when you say jump the shark, that they're talking about the AU episode, it almost seemed to me like they were talking about a different format. So I mean, I just started thinking about how like some shows will do, they'll do like these really wonky formats just to have fun once the show is well established. They usually can't do it when the show is not well established because it will turn off too many fans. But something like, they do like a found footage episode, or, some crime shows will do an episode that's kind of like Cops, where it's like all body cam footage and chasing people around from the POV of the body cam, things like that. Like it almost felt like they were saying that this episode was going to be that way, like the actual format of it was going to be very different, and that some fans might not like that, and so that could be the jump the shark moment. Now, I'm not saying that that's actually what it's going to be. I'm not saying it's a found footage episode. I mean, we'll just have to wait and see. It really could be talking more about the AU structure, like you're saying, that because it's an AU thing and because Beth's going to show up there. But the thing is, I don't know. I guess it's going to be a little different because it's an AU where Beth is still alive and the apocalypse didn't happen. That's what they've told us. And we definitely haven't had that on the show before, but we've had other similar things. We had Rick's very brief vision after Glenn and Abraham died of all of them being happy and together, and having dinner together at Alexandria. And granted, that was just a few seconds. It wasn't like an entire episode or anything. And it wasn't that the apocalypse didn't happen. It was just that Glenn and Abraham were not killed. But even so, like, why would that in and of itself be such a weird jump the shark, turn off kind of thing to the audience? Like, I feel like we've seen things like this before. Even if it wasn't exact, it was similar. So I feel like there's something more that we haven't quite put our fingers on yet, and that we probably won't until we see the episode. But I agree. I feel like when they say that people are either going to love it or think that they jumped the shark, they are talking about the AU episode. So that just makes it even more intriguing. I just wonder what it's going to bring us. As for the title sequence and her being a full paid employee, that's just something that's understood and was understood about like back in season 5. You only get an opening credit if you are considered a main character, and it's like it's a status thing, but it's like the tier at which you're paid. So I mean, it's if you were working in a corporate job, people have different levels of being paid, right? And if you're getting an opening credits mention versus just when they come back from the opening credits and you see a bunch more names of actors, right? Those are usually actors that are guest starring, right? Or they are minor characters, and so they're not quite at the same pay scale because they have less screen time, therefore they're working less, all of that. It's just the way that it works, when it comes to the TV show and everything. And if she is in the opening credits, that actually says a lot about whether AMC still has her on the payroll, because if she, we know she's on the payroll anyway. She's done so many other things that are, with ABC and our sister company to AMC, and like all kinds of things that we found, right? You can find old metas about that. So we kind of already know that anyway, but we're just saying that this would be proof, because if she really wasn't on AMC's payroll anymore and hadn't been since season 5, and she decided to, come back and do this episode, they could just say it wouldn't be an opening credits thing, and they would just say, and, special guest star Emily Kinney, that kind of thing. And I mean, don't get me wrong, the episode may say that. We don't know that she's going to be in the opening credits. It was just something that people were talking about and kind of conjecturing about and saying it would be really interesting if she would, because if she is, that would be really good evidence, almost proof that she is still on AMC's payroll because they wouldn't give her that opening credits mention unless she was on their payroll as a full-time employee. Like there's no way that would happen. It would just be like a minor credit as in, special guest star. So anyway, that's why, but we'll just have to wait and see what happens. I will also say that if she isn't in the opening credits, that doesn't mean she's not on AMC payroll. It just depends on how they decide to credit her in the episode. So anyway, it's a minor point. It's not something to really worry about, just something people were talking about. Let's see. Did I want? That's cool that she replied to Angela Kang. And yeah, you could be right that it's because she recognized your name, but even so, it's still exciting. And yeah, I hope you're right about Daryl Dixon, and I do hope too that we get a mention or at least some nod to Daryl in the AU episode. I'm looking forward to that and to looking for stuff like that. So I hope you're right. After 10 years and a 45,000-mile journey, we can finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. Agreed. For the life of me, I can't remember. Was Negan ever in Maggie's hilltop office after the Green family portrait showed up on the wall, but before it burned down? Would give an in-universe excuse for Negan to have some idea what Beth looked like. I don't know either. I don't think we ever saw him in there. I could be wrong. But I mean, it could also be something that they didn't think to do back then that they could add in here. So it could be like something that happens off camera. And of course, we can't assume that if we don't have some mention of it. But people are talking about how maybe Maggie will talk to Negan about Beth. I mean, maybe they will actually say that he was in there at some point, or that I guess it wouldn't even have to be in her office. I mean, assuming that Jadis painted that painting, maybe he just saw it at some point when she was creating it or something. But in order for that to be the case, in order for it to be like canon in the show, they would have to mention that to us. They would have to have either Negan or Maggie mention that. So yeah, we'll just have to listen for it and see if maybe they do mention that. But that's a good point. That's a good idea that would be a good way for them to explain how he has some idea what Beth looks like. On a scale of 1 to a million, I would be over the freaking moon if they put the EK flashback into the title credits for the AU's alternate opening sequence. Yeah, I would too. That would be really fun. I hope they do that. Something I noticed about what seems to be a new tattoo for Norman post TWD and pre spinoff that made an overt appearance up front in 101 of Daryl Dixon, but clearly disappeared later in that same episode. We know that his tattoos do not actually have anything to do with the character and are personal, but some do make an appearance on camera. When Daryl washes up in Marseille, his shirt is blatantly unbuttoned further down than usual, and the top of a tattoo in the shape of an outline of a heart right in the area of the lower sternum is visible. This is a real tattoo for Norman, and it disappears when Daryl is shirtless taking a bath later that same episode. The simple design matches Beth's heart necklace and is right in the place at the base of the sternum where she teased Daryl to stab her and still. I seriously doubt the brief appearance of this tattoo on screen was accidental, as the imagery is potentially useful. Yeah, I do remember I think people talked about this back when Daryl Dixon was first on. And yeah, I don't think I have a whole lot to add. I agree. I think it was intentional, and then they took it away. I don't know. It seems like people were talking about maybe they took it away in the bath scene because they didn't want anyone to think that the heart was there for Isabel. Even though he ended up having a very, very brief relationship with her. That's, like you say, that's not what it's really about. And that's the only thing I can think of, like the only logic I can think of for why they might have done that. I will go back to the argument that Daryl Dixon, as a spinoff, is about him finding his happy ending, because that's what they said at the beginning. And yes, we know that things have changed and that they might be reshuffling things, and who knows what that means for the end of the series. But I do agree with those who are pointing out that the only reason to push it back a year is if things are being added. Because if they had just filmed it exactly like all the other seasons and everything was good and then they wrapped, there's no reason to push it back, So there might be adding things, they might be needing to integrate with other things like Dead City, we just don't know. But yeah, I'm sure that the appearance and then disappearance of this tattoo was probably symbolic. And, I will also say again, as I've said many times, that I hope once Beth returns, Gimple will come out and tell us what it all means, or what they were thinking about when they put this symbolism in place. And honestly, he probably wouldn't until the show was actually over. And I think Beth's going to return long before that. So, yeah, I don't know how realistic I hope that is for me, but I hope eventually at some point that he'll do that for us. But yeah, it's a really good observation. So thanks for that. Let's see, went through all of those. I always love when you read the comments because usually they are so eye-opening. They really are. People come up with different things and different ways to look at things, and it's always useful for everybody to share. So That's what a group project is good for. Each individual can show us more insights and different angles to look at. I'm always so proud to be on this long trip. Certainly doesn't feel like it's been over a decade now, right? Exactly. I'm more convinced than ever now that Trillium was chosen as a title because it means Beth Root after seeing 301. I was expecting there to be some kind of real reference to Trillium in the episode, i.e., they were using old Native American techniques for medical purposes, but we never hear anything about that at all. In fact, the episode may as well have been called Incubator in that case because that was the major medical thrust of the episode. There was no real reason that it specifically needed to be named Trillium other than to fit the naming convention of the titles spelling out the flight or the light. As to Daryl or Norman's age, it's not even just the shippers. Most people in the general audience still think Daryl was like 40 in season one just because that's how old Norman was. I don't know why, but only Daryl's character seems to be given that treatment. Very few actors on the show were playing the age they actually were. I agree with the commentator that Daryl is meant to be much younger than people assume him to be, and that has nothing to do with our ship, in my opinion, and everything to do with the context clues we've been given. There's plenty in the show pointing to him being somewhere in his 20s at the start, including that comment about him being very young when all this started. Carol calling him a boy that's become a man in S4, his general demeanor, S1 and 2, et cetera, but more which I feel like have been gone over ad nauseum. But I really feel like it's going to take the writers giving him a specific age for people to actually see it. I think it's more likely than not, though, that they are just never going to officially age him. Because honestly, Beth comes back at this point, she's going to be in her early 30s. So whatever age Daryl is shouldn't matter. You still get the handful of people saying, but he knew her as a teenager and find a way to make it creepy. But the reality is she's a 30-year-old woman and can be with whoever she wants. Agreed. I have no disagreement with anything you said there. And I also feel like if they did eventually give him an age, like let's say she comes back and they go, oh, by the way, Daryl is 37 or something like that, you would have a huge backlash of the audience going, what? We had no idea, even though, like you said, they've given us a lot of context clues. Not least that they keep dyeing Norman's hair. You know, they're obviously trying to make him look younger. So anyway, I completely agree. To address some of the comments, thinking Hourglass is the missing 17 days, very disappointing, but that does not look like it's going to be the case. One of the reviewers who saw the full season says that Beth is the only character we see in the season. Okay, that's a good point. Like you would, if we were doing the 17 days, we would see Glenn and Tyrese and all those people who were there. I was really pulling for Hourglass to be the missing 17 days as well. Now that doesn't mean though that we won't be told about it though. We just won't see it. There is still the possibility that we get Maggie talking about it this season. Yeah, always possibilities. There is a 17 days reference in Daryl Dixon season 3 when they are attempting to sail across the Atlantic with Julian. He tells them they will arrive in North America in 11 to 17 days. Now, I know folks who have sailed that crossing. In the sailboat they are on, realistically, no less than 5 weeks. I don't think 11 to 17 days left with good wind puts them in a spot, looking at Julian's map and where he puts them, match, and they would not be where a storm would crash them on the north of Spain with the boat not broken up and tossed overboard. Especially they are not on harnesses attached to the boat for safety at night or in a storm with swells like that. So the mention of 17 is odd and obvious. Don't know why the number 11 is mentioned. So, you know, that's a good point. And that could be a reference though to the 1-1 that we saw in season 5. We saw it on like Noah's t-shirt and there's other people that are way more well versed in that than me. But it could be either way. It's a symbol that we've seen before. Also, they're definitely using Norman's tattoos, aside from the brief glimpse of the outline of a heart, center chest, and then disappears. The tattoo on his left hand definitely are showcased in season 2. When Laurent tells Daryl that Isabel loved him, and Daryl hands back the Rubik's Cube with a white cross that is prominently displayed on the shelf behind Laurent, the camera focuses on Daryl's hand. It is on purpose. We first see 3 small stars or something like that at the knuckles, either a Beth number 3 or 3 women, Beth, Leah, Isabel possibly. At the same time, we see a little skull, all 3 dead in his understanding. Then his hand shifts and we see the small red heart, so affection, if not love for all 3, or romance. But I don't think the red heart is Norman's. I think that was added. Cannot find any verified images of a red heart on his hand outside of the scenes in Daryl Dixon season 2. Just one that looks faked. Okay, yeah. This is good stuff. I don't have a whole lot to add, but I'm with you. I do think that I haven't talked about the tattoos too much in Daryl Dixon, but I did talk about them more than once in the main show that they were clearly using them. So yeah, I totally agree. And I think your analysis is really good here. So, and yeah, good point. I do remember talking about this a little bit back when, this actually aired, but I don't know that we analyzed it quite this way. So that's really very insightful. So I like that. Great eye. Okay, I think that's all of them. Okay, So I will call it there for right now. We are going to get a new episode in a few days here. And yeah, I'm just excited to see what comes next. So continue to send in your comments and your asks, and we'll see what episode 3 brings us. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.